Shalom. Welcome back to Understanding the World with Rabbi David Kaufman. I'm joined in the studio by Mark Finkelstein, and we're joined via Skype by Phyllis and Michael Sommer, my rabbi colleagues from Chicago. Before we talk to Phyllis and Michael, I'd like to thank Temple B'nai Jeshurun and also the Jewish Federation of Greater Des Moines, Jewish Community Relations Council, for their support of this show. And Phyllis and Michael, welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks.
Hi, it's good to see you. Phyllis, your hair is already coming back, a lot more than mine is.
Yeah, I'm feeling blessed.
Okay, that's good. So it's great to have you on the show today. And I know you said this is your first time doing this kind of thing. It's kind of fun to see, to have you on the show.
It's great to be here. Very fun.
So we were just in Chicago, and we did the 36 Rabbis Shave for the Brave, and we've raised quite a bit of money. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what we raised money for?
Sure. So, there's an organization called the St. Baldrick's Foundation, which is not about a saint at all. It's actually a mashup of St. Patrick's Day and going bald. A group of guys about 10 years ago, maybe 11 years ago, decided they were going to have a St. Patrick's Day party, and they were going to shave their heads and raise money for childhood cancer research. And they came up with the name, and then they were very successful with their first event, and they started a foundation. And so it's pretty well known in the childhood cancer world. St. Baldrick's Foundation actually is the largest funder of pediatric cancer research, second only to the federal government. And so when our son Sam was first diagnosed with leukemia back in June of 2012, some of the doctors, nurses, people said, "You should shave your head." And I said, Sam, what do you think? And he said, "Absolutely not." He was completely opposed to me shaving my head. So we kind of tabled it. And throughout the time of Sam's treatment, it was always in the back of my mind. And then last October, he was actually doing really well, but I was sort of feeling helpless about the state of childhood cancer. We knew lots of kids who had died, lots of kids who had relapsed. There were lots of things going wrong that I didn't like. And so I posted it on Facebook. I think it's time for me to shave my head. And my colleague and friend, Rabbi Rebecca Shore, wrote back and said, "I'm in, let's do it." And then she said, "Let's do a CCAR shave, a shave at the Central Conference of American Rabbis convention." From that moment, we began the planning, and we thought, wouldn't it be great to get 36 colleagues to do it with us? And we sort of thought that was a long shot. And then just a few weeks later, after we came up with the idea, we got the news that Sam had relapsed and there wasn't anything else the doctors could do. We decided to go ahead with the shave event anyway, not knowing exactly what was going to happen. And Rebecca really took over the work and the planning. And we knew that the fundraising we were going to do wasn't going to save our son, but it was going to hopefully help to avoid this for future families.
And how much money has been raised so far?
I didn't check. I meant to check right before we came on with you, but I think we were at about $614,000 last time I checked.
And the goal has been increased quite a few times since.
I know we're actually we're giving our colleagues and friends a little bit of a frustration because we started with a goal of $180,000, and as soon as we hit it, we doubled the goal to 360, and then we hit $360,000. We hit that, I forget when, and then as soon as we did, we raised it to $520,000, and that's what we hit right at the shave. And so we decided to increase it to $613,000, another nice Jewish number, not a multiple of 18, but we liked it anyway. And we hit that right before Seder's this week, and so immediately raised the goal to 720. So the goal keeps increasing because I always want to aim higher.
Hi, guys. This is Mark in Des Moines. Great to be on with you. Can you tell us what's the significance of 36 rabbis, and what were the actual number of rabbis who participated in this?
It begins with the number 18. 18 in Hebrew are the letters Chet and Yud for Chai. Chai is the word for life. So life and the number 18 have eternally been connected in the Jewish people and in Hebrew. And so 36 is double life or double Chai. So we started with a goal of 36 rabbis. 36 is also a number in Jewish mysticism. It is believed there are 36 righteous souls that for the sake of them, the world is always kept in existence. And so we went with the 36 Rabbis Shave for the Brave.
If I could also say, there's an organization I need to give them their shout out, the 46 Mamas Who Shave for the Brave. They've been shaving, I think, for 5 years. And 46 is how many kids are diagnosed with cancer each week, I believe. And they're 46 moms of kids with cancer who shave their heads every year and raise quite a bit of money as well. And we modeled our concept of a national group of people coming together on their model. And there were, I think you also wanted to know, there were 72, I think was the final type total participants of shavees, 74 maybe. But at the convention, there were 54 of us who shaved all together. And then many people shaved previously at their Purim carnivals, and one person shaved a little bit later. Lots of different ways that people participated.
And I shaved at our Neshama Kralbach and Josh Nelson concert right before the conference. So
right, you showed up bald.
Yeah, I showed up bald.
That's
yeah,
right. That's right. Being the father of a child who had cancer, is presumably still in remission. What were your feelings when you first found out about the diagnosis of your son? Your internal feelings.
When we got the news that Sam had leukemia, I think I felt like the bottom fell out of our world, and I was spiraling down some big, deep, dark hole. We really had no idea what was going to happen, what to expect, and the doctors kept saying, "Okay, it's leukemia," and then they said, "Oh, but it's AML, acute myeloid leukemia, and sort of that's the bad kind." And then they said, "Oh, but he's doing really well, but it's the bad kind." And so, we were, I think there was a lot of...
It was just one day you're out of the hospital and everything seems normal, even though Sam was in a lot of pain. And the next day you're in the hospital for the rest of the year. Yeah. With 4 weeks in the hospital and then a week or so off and then 4 weeks in the hospital. So from June until November, it was a constant of living a completely different life.
And you spent a lot of the time communicating with people online too. I mean, during this process from diagnosis on, you had been doing blogging, your own blog before that, and you had a lot of followers and you had a lot of colleagues who were following you. But a lot of us were kept in the loop kind of daily. Or certainly every other day or so, of what was going on. How was that like? What was that like?
We had the problem of how do we answer the same question once instead of 10,000 times? How do we make sure our people know how we are doing and what we need? And Phyllis thought that blogging would be the best venue to put our lives out there and to give the information and to let people know how we're doing so that they didn't feel like they couldn't intrude on us or didn't feel like they were intruding on us. Phyllis is the associate rabbi of a 950 family congregation in Glencoe, Illinois. I, at the time, was a rabbi of approximately 290 families in Highland Park. And so you have over like 6,000 people that wanted to care for us and wanted to know how we were doing. And so Phyllis began the blog, and we would write based on who was in the hospital with Sam to explain how he was doing and what the day was like, so that everyone could know where we were and what was going on and how we were doing, so that we weren't always answering the same question.
Go ahead. Sorry.
How old was Sam when this happened?
6.5.
6.5.
Yeah. You were saying, Phyllis?
Well, I was going to say, we started the blog as a way to really keep people in the loop, and not just the people in our congregations, but Sam's classmates and our colleagues and friends all over the country and the world and our family. I mean, everyone who wanted to know how our little boy was doing. And it started out as a way to keep people informed. And I think it became something really different that we hadn't really, we never imagined or planned for. At least for me, I would sit down to write each night, and it was kind of a way to frame what had happened that day and to find something in each day that was of value, and to maintain in some ways a record of what was happening. And then it also became, I think, a window into this world that people don't see or think about. It's not very easy to go visit an oncology unit. They don't want people to come and just walk in off the street. And it's hard to get a glimpse, I think, of what families are going through. And I even as a rabbi, someone who visits people in the hospital, and I worked at Children's Hospital in Cincinnati as a chaplain intern. And, I don't think I would have ever understood what it was like. And I think we didn't intend for that to happen. But as we wrote and kept going, I think it became something that was of value and a way for Michael and I to continue to teach and to tell our story, and to use our story to bring awareness to something that we feel is really not, people don't know these stories. And if they do, it's because they know somebody. But we really made it, I think, personal for a lot of people who didn't know us, didn't know Sam, but now have this connection to this world.
Yeah, and I think many of us, posted your blog on our blog, and then it ended up involving many of our congregants. And, toward the end, I think many of us felt like we knew Sam, personally, because we had been following your narrative, or we could see Sam in people who were in our lives, and we could connect to you and in many different ways. And I had, I can tell you, I had congregants who only knew of you through Facebook, through my posts of your stuff on Facebook, who would come to me in tears and tell me how moved they were by something that you wrote. I don't know, how did you have that kind of experience with people? And I know it kind of became an international thing. There were media all around the world were covering it.
I think it for sure happened that we were getting emails and Facebook messages and all sorts of things from perfect strangers. But not only us, Sammy got letters and cards and packages and paintings and books and incredible handmade things that people really, really talked about Sam and really thought about him and really got to know him. There was some amazing things that were done that based only on the fact that people knew him from what we wrote about him. And it was really an unbelievable experience to feel that the whole world was paying attention to what was going on in our family and praying for us and for Sam and putting us in their mind. It was really an amazing feeling.
That there was actually a universal connection, that it touched people throughout the world, and then in turn they did their best to touch our lives in a positive fashion, and to let us know that Sam and our family were in their prayers and in their thoughts. And it was incredible to show him how, I don't think he really understood how many people were out there. I don't think he understood. We couldn't quantify in a way to show him that there were 10,000 people out there thinking of them, or 20 or 100,000 people out there thinking about him, or that other organizations would forward the blog and would talk about it, and they may have had, hundreds of thousands of followers. That really it went global, and we felt cared for and we felt carried through the hardest times, and I felt light at times because I felt that I was never alone, that there were always people there, supporting us and loving us and praying for us during this time.
Now, I know it started with the Superman Sam pictures, with the Superman pictures of people wearing the Superman outfits of the kids, and I remember that from the early days. Is that how that was your initial attempt to get him to understand with pictures?
Yeah, I remember saying to him, Sammy, there are so many people out there who said Misha Berach for you. I think it started on a Friday night, and I said, all these people went to synagogue tonight, and their synagogues, they sing Misha Berach just like we do at our synagogue. And I said, all these people, and I said, how many do you think there are? And he said, I think he said, 100, or 500. And I remember thinking it had to be so many more than that, knowing how many Jews there are and who I knew, and then knowing that we went outside. I mean, we certainly did not only have Jews who were a part of our community. And so I tried to think of ways to prove it to him. And so, yeah, I created this idea of superheroes for Sam. And I asked people to put on their favorite superhero shirt and take a picture of themselves and send it to him. That was it. And it became this crazy thing. We got so many pictures, and so many people printed out Superman signs, and in big groups, and they took pictures of themselves holding up the signs, and it was pretty amazing. We got packages from almost all of the URJ camps, for example, where their staff or their campers kind of stood together and did this, and they had superhero days, and lots of people all over organizations and schools, and just so it was such an easy thing to do to sort of lift the spirits of this one little boy, and
to visually show him,
so
on the
he
walls,
could see these people.
Over 300 or 400 pictures on every inch of wall in his first room, of people he knew, of people he didn't know, connecting to him and sending a picture just to let him know that not were they only just thinking of them at that moment, but they were always thinking of him, and that these pictures were reminding him, or reminders that he wasn't alone.
Mm-hmm. Can you in some way tell us about Sam? What was he like?
Sam was the best baby in the world. He has 2 other siblings because he was the best baby in the world.
Well, he has
3 siblings, but
2
one
that
was
came
older.
Later.
But he has 2 younger siblings and 1 older sibling. He just was a great baby and grew up into the most playful and energetic and bright little boy, always curious, a little snarky, but a very wonderful spirit.
Sam was the middle child for a long time. Our youngest was born when he was 5, so he was the middle child for 5 years of his life, and so Sam really embodied the middle child, so the stereotypical middle child. He wanted to make sure everything was always fair, and he kind of counted everything out to make sure it was very, very fair. But he also adored his siblings, and he never was without them. And when he was without them, it was such an unusual thing for him, and that he didn't know what to do with it. He really loved to be around them and to have them near him. And so, he was very social. That was really important to him, to have his people around him all the time. And that was what he really missed the most when he was in the hospital, was having his family around him. I'm so grateful for the technology that allowed him to use FaceTime and to Skype and to be able to connect with people outside of the hospital. That was just incredible. And all the people who came to visit him and to see him. But he also loved nature. Sammy loved to be outside. He loved bugs. He loved reptiles and frogs. I caught frogs for him, and bugs. I analyzed bugs, and oh gosh. And
he was very funny. Early on, he went to me and said, Dad, this whole Superman thing, I'm not really into superheroes. And I was like, Sam, what are you into? It's like, well, I'm into turtles, I'm into frogs, I'm into dinosaurs, or aliens that happen to be a turtle, frog, or a dinosaur.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, yes.
Right.
He loved that.
Love that.
We were very clear from the beginning that he was not obsessed with superheroes. Some little boys are. He thought that was kind of cool stuff, but that wasn't what he loved best. But we really believed that he was a superhero to us. He was everyone. We part of where the moniker Superman Sam came from was that in the hospital, the staff, and they're amazing, and they immediately begin to lift you up no matter who you are. And so they called him, hey, Superman Sam, you're a big Superman. And they used all sorts of language like that. And we said, okay, that works for us. He doesn't have to love Superman in order to be a superhero.
And he made it all seem easy. For us with Sam, it was 17 harrowing months walking on eggshells, but only one horrific month. He didn't really give us any startling moments. There were no moments in intensive care. He made it seem like a bad flu, that it was just all going to be fine. He handled chemo like it was just a stomach virus. Oh, I'm a little sick. There was one incredible day during the summer. He was taking outpatient chemo, 1 pill a day, and we were going to a movie. He says, wait a minute, I don't feel well. He goes and he gets sick. He brushes his teeth, cleans his mouth out, and goes, okay, we can go to the movies now. I was like, really? He's like, yeah, can I have popcorn? I was like, a little. But he was that kind of kid. Like, he didn't let it ruin the rest of his day. There were days when he was very fatigued and very sick, but for the most part,
he was a kid.
He was a kid. Get it done, get it out of the way. Okay, I just vomited. Now I want to go do my homework, or now I want to go watch a movie, or I want to read a book, or do art therapy. He wanted to live his life. He didn't want this to define him. He didn't want it to hinder him. He wanted still to do everything. He hated being cooped up in the hospital room.
What did he think about having parents who were rabbis?
Well, he didn't know any different. He was relatively at home in the synagogue, let's put it that way. He was from his first days he was here. But I remember when he was maybe about 3 or 4, and maybe he was 4. He was at services on a Friday night, and we had apples out on the table for the Oneg Shabbat, and somebody let him into the sanctuary. He'd been sort of taken out into the hallway. He was, I don't know, misbehaving, or I don't know what he was doing. I was on the bima, and he took this big apple and he was holding it and eating it, and he walked all the way down the center aisle and up onto the steps. Our bima is up a few steps, and he climbed up to the top step and just sat down on the top step and ate the apple, looking out at the congregation. Yep. We continued to lead the service. I was giggling. My senior colleague thought it was really funny, which is good, right? And eventually he invited Sam to come up, and he sort of involved whatever he talked about. He worked Sam into the service, but he was not afraid. And he sang in our junior choir. He loved to be, he loved to sort of be up in front of people and do those kinds of things. He was learning Hebrew. He was enrolled in, we have a 2nd grade Hebrew class. He was enrolled and he didn't start. And so over the summer, in the fall, I said, do you want to start to learn to read Hebrew so we can start, you can get a jump on that. And he was really excited that he would learn Hebrew. And so we spent every day learn a new letter, and then he would explain it to his hospital teacher, who wasn't Jewish and had never learned Hebrew, or he'd explain it to sort of whoever came in, the doctors. He'd show them, this is the Hebrew letter I learned today. So I think he kind of rolled with the idea of having rabbis as parents. I don't think any of our children, well, they don't know any different. So
it wasn't an option.
Tell us a little bit about camp. I know you're a longtime Masrui person, so tell us a little bit about camp and how he did at camp.
Sam loved camp. Sam loved camp dearly. I mean, it was probably the hardest part was missing the last 2 summers of camp, he was furious. He grew up there. He was there from the moment he was 6 months old.
Actually, when he was less than 3 months old, we took him up to camp for a winter meeting up there, and he stayed over at camp with us then. And then in that spring, he was about 5 months old, and I staffed a retreat, and he learned to roll over at camp. All my kids have milestones at camp, and he knew that. He knew that he had learned to roll over there, and he knew that camp was a place where he'd learned to pull up to standing when he was 8 months old, in the lodge at camp. That was his second home, and he loved it there.
There are a lot of things that we should talk about. One is, we've mentioned the hospital a few times. Can you tell us a little bit about the hospital, which hospital it was, and what it was like? And you've mentioned here and there, but I want to make sure the hospital gets its due.
Sure. So Sam was treated at Children's Hospital of Wisconsin. We live in the north part of Chicago, pretty far north, and there were some complications during the time when Sam was being diagnosed, where Children's Memorial in Chicago was moving facilities. We ended up going up to Wisconsin. I'm actually from Wisconsin, so it seemed pretty comfortable for us.
I had to make the decision, and out of the 3 choices, it made most sense to me, because Phyllis also doesn't love driving to the city sometimes, that if we were going to have to do this a lot, heading home to where she grew up, very easy drive north, very little traffic. I don't know that we ever hit much traffic going either way. And for her, it would be home. Her family, her cousins, her mom and dad were there, so they were within 20 minutes of the hospital. So Phyllis would always be surrounded by her family. My family's already close. My mom lives next door to us in our duplex. And so for me, it was very important psychologically that it be in a direction where Phyllis felt comfortable going.
So Children's Hospital of Wisconsin is one of the top facilities, in particular for leukemia. Their funder is the MAC Fund, which is Midwest Athletes Against Childhood Cancer. Every hospital sort of has their own local funder of research, and that's the MAC Fund. They're a pretty remarkable organization, having raised, I don't even know the millions of dollars they've raised over the years. And so it was a world-class facility with everything we needed there. It's a really nice, beautiful hospital, as so much hospitals can be beautiful, I suppose. And I've never met people like the oncology team there, the nurses and the care. I mean, everyone from nurses to nursing assistants to the women who swept the floors.
Every person was better than the next.
It was, everybody got to know us, and even in the gift shop and in the cafeteria, and the security guys who checked you in, they all knew us. They all knew Sam.
They made you feel like family every moment, and the nurses would come in and make you feel like you were their only patient. Mm-hmm. And you knew they had 3 or 4 or 5 other patients, and they would come in and they would give you such high quality of care that you felt as if you were the only family, that they would take the time, they were rarely rushed, and make sure that your needs were met. And for a home you wish you didn't have to live in, they made it feel like a home you were safe while living there.
And then later on, when Sam had, after his first relapse, the treatment for AML after relapse, following relapse, is bone marrow transplant. That's the protocol. And the bone marrow transplant program at Children's Hospital of Wisconsin is really one of the best in the country. People come from all over the country to be treated there. In fact, we made friends from all over who were staying. Who came in to Wisconsin for their child to undergo bone marrow transplant there, because that was the place, that was one of the top places to go. So we felt very, very confident that Sammy was getting really some of the finest care we could possibly give him.
Now, dealing with care, obviously we're raising money through Shave for the Brave. What does that money go toward? What's that money going to be used for?
It goes towards funding researchers. The money itself probably is enough for 5 or 6 year-long Research grants,
scholarships. So the only thing that's going to change cancer treatment is research, and almost every drug that Sammy got, he was on a lot of different studies, but most of the drugs that he got haven't changed in 20 years. And a lot of the chemo that's given to kids with different kinds of cancer, not just leukemia, most of those drugs are adult drugs. One of the drugs he was on was an experimental sort of thing, and I think it was for the dose for adults was 4 pills, and he was taking 1 pill. They weren't, they were sort of, I mean, I don't want to say they were guessing, but they were doing what they were making do with what they had. And that's what it does. That's what pediatric cancer, that's what it's facing, is that so much of the treatments are old, and they're somewhat out of date. The treatments are very harsh. The chemos are really, really hard on young developing bodies in ways that they affect children in very different ways than they affect adults. And so the research really needs to kind of catch up. And so organizations like St. Baldrick's are raising money to augment the federal funding, because really there's not a lot of money from the drug companies, for example, in pediatric cancer research. It's a small, to them it's small, and it is it doesn't have the it doesn't get the publicity, and it doesn't get them the revenue that they're looking for as drug companies. So the money has to come from people who are a little more dedicated to the cause and for its own purpose rather than for profit. And so that's where the government comes in, St. Baldrick's and other organizations. And there are quite a few that are funding research across the country.
The federal government just granted some new money for childhood research. Can you say a little bit about that? And
sure. There was a bill just recently signed, the Gabriella Miller Pediatric Cancer Research Act. I think that's the full name of it. And it redirects a little bit of federal money towards additional funding for pediatric cancer research. It's certainly a start. It was, and it got bipartisan support, which is always good. And I think it's a start. Putting stuff like that in front of Congress wakes people up and tells them that this is a problem. This is important. 7 kids die every day from childhood cancer. It is the #1 disease killer of children in our country. It's not, every day I hear about somebody else diagnosed with cancer. It's not small. One of our friends whose son died of a brain tumor, she always says, it ain't rare and it ain't fair. And that's what I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, now obviously you said that you interacted with multiple other families with children who were facing various types of cancer. How was that like relating with other families as you were going through this?
At the points you were able to connect, you felt like a team. You felt you might be the only people who had something in common in the world. A lot of times you just talked like parents, and if you were lucky, the children could just be children. There were some incredible moments of the kids just playing video games together. So you're able to be out of the rooms, you're able to be in the common area of the oncology ward, and they were just able to be kids, either to do art therapy together or to walk around or to throw a ball back and forth or to play video games. And the parents would just be parents because you both or all sort of knew some of the hell you were both, you were going through as parents. And so you would talk about other things or find your commonalities of what did you have in common, or, where do you live? Because it was clear with the children in front of you, everything else you were going through.
Yeah, I think there was this sense that we were in this very small club that nobody ever wants to be in. But if we stand together in it, then we have this sort of shared experience, and we have people we can go to who sort of understand a little more that fear that you feel when the kid spikes a fever and you have to make that phone call and go to the emergency room in the middle of the night, or you know, when Sammy relapsed, and you know, I remember calling a friend whose son had a bone marrow transplant, and she had totally understood how I felt, because she had envisioned herself having the same feelings, or she had the same feelings as she went through the diagnosis experience with her son. And so it's definitely a sisterhood and brotherhood of trial by fire, and nobody wants to be there, but we gotta stand together. It really created strong connections with other parents, and I'm still Facebook friends with a lot of parents that we met through the hospital in Wisconsin, and through different ways across the country. I know people, parents of kids that I've communicated with and connected through different online groups and things like that.
And one of the best friends that we made out of this experience, the mom came out and was with us after Sammy died with the family, stayed for the funeral and for the week of Shiva. And it was incredible to have that support, to have made such a connection, to have entered hell and to walked out with such a blessing of another family in our life. And such a loving connection was just beyond expectations.
Now, as a rabbi, we have to deal with a lot of very difficult things, and there are times when it's very difficult to speak, and it's very difficult to share our feelings because we're connected to somebody who's passed away. I can't even imagine what it was like to write the posting the day that Sammy relapsed. I mean, even for me, I was choked up even thinking about reading it, much less writing it. I don't know how you were able to get through that. And the impact that single posting had, I'm tearing up right now just thinking about it. But the impact that single posting had, I know, on me and on so many other people, was just so profound to be able to share those feelings at that moment. Can you talk a little bit about what it was like to be able to force yourself through that? I mean, not only at that moment, but other times, but especially that moment.
Well, Michael's looking at me because I'm the one who wrote that, for me, the writing really became a catharsis, an opportunity to think about, how do I feel, and what am I going to tell my other kids? I think a lot of it came down to, I can't just collapse. I have to talk to Sammy, and I have to talk to David and Yael, and even Sally, who's only 3 and doesn't understand. I have to be able to put words out there that are going to in some way make sense. And I have to be able to answer questions. Actually, truthfully, I didn't want to have to answer questions. I didn't want to make phone calls and all sorts of things. And so putting it all together into a blog post, gave me that opportunity. But to think about what I wanted to say, and it just sort of sit down at the computer and let it kind of pour out, helped me to process how I felt and what was next. I remember writing that post in the day of the relapse. And remember, we would get information and post it. I would sort of hold on to the information for a day or two and try to figure out how I was going to say what I needed to say. So there was sort of agonizing, hours where people would say relatively normal, benign things to me, and I would just feel this crushing weight. So the words would have to come out of me at some point. And I remember I wrote something on that post, something like, we might not update this blog. Once we found out he had relapsed, I didn't know what I didn't know how would we keep blogging? How would we keep writing about what was happening? I said, we might not. And then I remember writing something like, but we might write all the time because it might help us. And later on, I almost wish I had written even more, because I have this record of those days, of his last days. And I wish I had every minute recorded on video, on camera, on words, so I could tell you, I I don't ever want to forget or lose those minutes. And so I have all of that in that record that I never intended it to be the record of the end of his life, but it really is. It really is. And so, so once I started, it was like I couldn't stop, and we kept writing.
And there were those points, you'd have a day that was just a waiting in place in the hospital, and Sammy would sort of be done and frustrated, and it'd be a long day, and you'd be at the 7th or 8th hour, and he just wanted to be on his iPad, and you just wanted to read a book. Me wanted to read a book on my iPad, and because he made it look like everything was going to be fine. It was just a day. We were always just waiting, and tomorrow would be a little more medication, and we were always just waiting. And so you'd have these normal moments of just being alone while being together, not thinking that you should be reading another book together, or you should be creating stories together, or talking about the things you would do in a someday that you didn't know wasn't going to come, because he made it feel like someday was always going to come. Like no matter what, he made it feel like he could overcome anything. It never appeared as if all of a sudden his body was going to betray him and not allow the medicines to work.
And I know that after that diagnosis, you decided to go to Israel, and with family and friends. Can you talk a little bit about the Israel trip and what that meant?
Well, when we're laughing because it was a very difficult trip for us.
I can imagine.
Yeah. When Sammy, we found out on a Tuesday, and on Wednesday we told Sam, and we talked to him in the morning, the two of us, and the other kids were at school, and he kind of gave us, he sort of spewed out to us a list of sort of things. It wasn't really a list. It was just, oh my, I'm never going to. And, one of them was, I'm never going to go to Israel. And we'd always been talking about, Michael and I met in Israel, and it had always been part of our family. My brother lives in Israel. Michael and I have each visited Israel since the kids have been around. And we've been planning a trip next winter for our oldest son's bar mitzvah. And so Sammy had actually crossed it off the list, for example, when approached by Make-A-Wish. Well, where do you want to go? And he said, well, Israel, but we're already going there. And so he'd kind of pre-crossed it off his list. And so when he said that, it was just, when he said, I'm never going to see Israel, I thought, wow, is that really what you want to do? And then that same day, we had lunch. Sammy and I had lunch with my senior colleague, Stephen Lowenstein, and Sammy said it again, that he wanted to go to Israel. And Stephen worked a lot of magic to make it happen and to get us to Israel. We left on Sunday for Israel, and that was Wednesday. We left on Sunday for Israel. We got expedited passports and everything. And I gave Sammy a lot of outs all the way up to the end. And, he's 8 years old at that point. He didn't really know what to expect, but he just knew that there was something about Israel that he needed to see. It was not everything he imagined. The trip was so hard for him, and he physically and mentally, and it was the jet lag, and all the things that make a trip difficult were amplified for Sammy, so much so. And he was having some reactions to some medications and to the leukemia and sort of all sorts of things. And so it was a hard trip. I'm looking across my office at the moment. I have this picture of Sam on the beach in Tel Aviv that I look at. There were shining moments in each day, and I tried really hard to find them. There were a lot of really difficult moments.
The days also never ended. He didn't sleep well. It was hard. Stay up through the night.
But I really believe that the goal of that trip was to take all 4 of our kids to Israel, so that they would always remember that the first time they were in Israel, they were there as a family. And I think we've accomplished that. And I also think that in some ways I was already thinking forward and thinking about what it would be like when he wasn't here, and what we would talk about. And just the other day, I was talking about it with Solomon, our 3-year-old, and he said something about getting on a plane and going to Israel. And I said, yeah, you went on the plane. Who did you sit next to on the plane? Now, he sat next to me on the plane for 12 hours. And I said, who did you sit next to on the plane? And he said, I sat next to Sammy on the plane. And I said, okay, we're good. You know, his memory of this trip is going to be what it's going to be. And he has Sammy in his mind as his picture of a trip to Israel. And I think that even though the trip was really hard and it was really not how Sam wanted it or imagined it to be, we did our job in that we created that story in our family's history, that we took a journey to Israel before Sam died.
The literature of our tradition, did you find elements of that were helpful, comforting? Were there parts that let you down?
I think it was more the people. I think it was less the literature. I delved into the people, that my colleagues and my congregants and family and friends who surrounded us. And that gave me so much comfort as a Jew, as a rabbi, as a father, as a son, as a brother, as a friend. It never dawned on me that we'd have help in any of this. I just felt, okay, it'll be a hard year. We'll take care of the medical bills and insurance will kick in at such and such point. It would never have dawned on me that everyone else would have participated in taking a part in caring for us. And while I was still able to pray and lead services and be part of community, there wasn't any one place that provided more comfort than it ever had.
And I found myself reading the Psalms a lot. There are lots of words in the Psalms that are really comforting and protective in those words. But I started to spend a lot of time thinking about the way that we say things, and sort of when we say prayers for healing, for example, that we say, "Blessed are you, our God, who brings healing to the sick." I had started to rethink what that healing means. Healing was always, oh, he'll get better. Everything will be fine. And eventually healing became, I want this to be peaceful and I want him not to suffer and I want him not to be in pain. And I had said words like that to people, but I had never really fully felt it in that really deep, visceral way before that. So when I would say, Rofeh Cholim, I had to think about what I wanted, what I was asking for. And that was pretty unbelievable. And, the other is we said Hashkivenu with our kids, with Sam starting, and then with our kids after one sort of scary night in the hospital, when all I could think about was the idea of shelter and peace, and how at night things are scarier and everything seems scarier at night, and sort of bad stuff always seems to happen in the night. And that really brought the Hashkivenu liturgy home to me. And so we started to say it each night with the kids before their Shema, and I think it brought me some measure of comfort. I know that Sammy liked it, and I know that the kids still sort of insist upon it. So that's a part of our family's liturgy now.
We've got a couple minutes left. What is there anything else you'd like to share with us specifically that we haven't talked about?
I hope with our Shave for the Brave and whatever we choose to do in the future and the money that we raise as many communities, that someday no family ever has to experience what we've experienced.
And I think it's all of our hope that we can work toward ending childhood cancer, ending cancer period, but certainly making it so that families don't have to go through what you've gone through and what Sammy went through, and The difficulty is, as I told people when I did my shave, I raised money to combat childhood cancer. I shaved my head in solidarity with all those who've lost their hair without their intention because they got through chemotherapy or anything else. And there's so many people who face that kind of difficulty. And I think the impact of what you wrote, what both of you wrote, and of Shave for the Brave event and all of that was to show solidarity not only with people facing childhood cancer, but facing cancer as a whole, and really brought a lot of love and caring to people all around the world. It's a really wonderful thing. And if you're able, you can see at the bottom of the screen here the 36 Rabbis Shave for the Brave donations page at stbaldrick's.org. You can just look up 36 Rabbis Shave for the Brave on Google. You'll find it for sure. And then you're able to donate there to the cause to help combat childhood cancer. Any last words as before the show ends today?
I think the only thing that I would want to say is that, Sammy's story wasn't particularly unique or different. It was just that he had parents who were storytellers. And I really feel now that we're speaking for so many families and so many kids who don't have a voice. And so I'm grateful to you, David. Thank you for having us on your show and letting us sort of spread our story and continuing to talk about Sam and to hear his voice, his name said out loud by so many people, and to know that he still lives on in people's memories is really important for us, but also to tell everyone's story, all the Sams and all the parents like us who may not be able to tell their story, but we're here to stand and to keep that story going.
You're welcome. Thank you for joining us on the show today. Thank you to Phyllis Sommer and to Michael Sommer, both rabbis, and also to all of your children who contributed in some way to the stories that you have been teaching, and to all of our colleagues who have been helping out, and to all those to give of themselves to help others and who are working to eradicate childhood cancer. So wish you a happy Passover, and we will see you next week on Rabbi Kaufman's Understanding the World. Thank you.
Get away from us, you mean old credit card. We don't have